Pasensya na po kayo, Secretary. Ganun po yung technology namin dito at we're planning to upgrade po yung IT system namin sa House. Kasi yung mga ibang agencies po, na-upgrade namin yung IT. Siguro, ito po yung sign na dapat po yung House of Representatives madagdagan talaga ng budget para may upgrade po yung mga gamit namin. NBI Distor, narinig niyo po ba yung katanungan, yung message ng isang Facebook follower natin?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Good morning po. Narinig ko po yung...
Sir, mahina po ang dating nyo.
Hello, good morning po, Mr. Chair.
Ayan. Sir, pakilakasan po yung boses nyo.
Hello, sir. Good morning po. Magandang umaga po. Yes, sir. Narinig ko po yung reklamo po, sir. We will investigate Jesus J. Lorando po, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, NBA Director. Mahina ang boses mo. Shy ka pala sa camera. Babalikan na lang, pakibigyan na lang po ako ng feedback kung ano po yung nangyari sa investigation nyo. At nandito rin naman po si Secretary Guevara para i-assist po kayo at mabigyan po kami ng feedback tungkol dito sa Jesus G. Lorando, Chief Liquidation and Billing Division. Kahit po nagkamali si Ma'am Elizabeth di pa supil ng message, hindi po bale, hindi po sayang ang kanya message dahil nandito ang NBA at ang DOJ at sigurado mabibigyan sila ng hustisya. Ngayon po, punta na po tayo sa mga kasamahan ko sa Kongreso at para po sila ay magbigay ng kanilang katanungan. Minority Floor Leader Congressman Benbenito Abante, are you present? Are you there na po? Mapunta po muna tayo kay Congressman Edsel Lagman. Congressman Lagman, nandiyan na po ba kayo?
Na ba? Start.
Ano na?
Yes, Congressman Edsel Lagman, nakikita na po namin kayo. You're now recognized, Congressman Lagman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be directing my questions to the Bureau of Pardons and Parole. Are they present, Mr. Chairman?
Secretary Guevara, nandiyan po ba yung Bureau of Pardons?
Mr. Chair.
Represented po ang Board of Pardons and Parole at nandito rin po ang Undersecretary in charge of corrections.
Yes, nandito po sila, Congressman Lagman, yung in charge sa pardons and paroles.
Okay. So let me start my question. May we know when the Board of Pardons and Parole was first established?
Yusek, you're now acknowledged.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the Board of Pardons and Parole was established by virtue of the indeterminate sentence law, Mr. Chair.
And when was this?
It's a Commonwealth Act, so that was a long time ago, Mr. Chair.
A long time ago. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
A long time ago. Is it not that among the mandates and duties of the Board of Pardons and Parole is to recommend prisoners and convicts to the President of the Republic for executive clemency, like reprieves, commutation of sentence, conditional pardon, and absolute pardon?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Prior to the granting of absolute pardon to Pemberton, was there any prisoner or convict given absolute pardon by any president without the recommendation of the Board of Pardons and Parole?
Your Honor, if I remember correctly, Leviste was granted executive clemency, but that was the recommendation of the board was to deny. So as to whether or not there was a time when someone was granted executive clemency without going through the process of board deliberations, maybe we can ask the chairman, the present chairman of the Board of Pardons and Parole, as to the history, Your Honor.
Yusek Marco, please address the chair.
Sorry, Mr.
It's
Chair.
okay.
Mr. Chair. I remember also Robin Padilla was also granted executive clemency during this time, during this administration, Your Honor, without going through board deliberations. Mr. Chair.
So in other words, prior to the absolute pardon to Pemberton, there were convicts or prisoners granted absolute pardon without the recommendation of the board. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. Also, there were times when the Board of Pardons and Parole recommended for the denial of executive clemency, but this was reversed, or the executive clemency was nevertheless granted by the President, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
That was the case of Mr. Libiste. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And in the case of Robin Padilla, he was granted absolute pardon without the recommendation of the board?
I will need to confirm, Mr. Chair, because I was not yet the USEC during that time. But Mr. Chair, the head of the BPP is also online. Maybe we can ask for a definitive answer on that, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Can we get a definitive answer on this particular question?
Okay.
Chairman Calizo.
Chairman Calizo, can you please answer the question of Congressman Lagman? You're now recognized.
Ano question din?
BPP, baka other name, BPP. Alcala is PPA. Attorney Calizo? Wala po.
Hindi po present, Yusek Marco. Sino pa po ba yung ibang pwede makasagot niyan?
Oo nga po, nandyan yung BPP and they confirmed they're online. But maybe, maybe PPA Alan Alcala can pitch in. He's also a member
Mr.
of the...
Alan Alcala, can you please answer the question of our Congressman Lagman?
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Hi, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry I cannot answer the question. I am not aware of the previous happenings before me. It was actually administrator who was then ex-officio member of the board. I just assumed this year as OIC of Parole Administrator. Anyway, I think the board is also keeping track of this Zoom conference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Congressman Lagman, yun lang po yung kanyang sinagot sa inyong tanong.
Well, Mr. Chairman, considering the controversy surrounding the grant of absolute pardon to Pemberton, the concerned officials should have been curious enough to find out whether in the past there was any convict or prisoner granted absolute pardon without the recommendation or even against the recommendation of the Board of Pardons and Parole.
Yusek Marco, you're now recognized.
Mr. Chair, I think the best person to give the answer, the definitive answer, would be the chairman or any representatives from the Board of Pardons and Parole. But after the grant of executive clemency to Mr. Pemberton, I already asked for historical data on that. They were able to give me just the names of the Viste and also Robin Padilla, Mr. Chair. So another one was given during the time of GMA ERAP, also according to Yusek Sugay, Mr. Chair. But maybe later on, if the chairman of the BPP can be will be online, Your Honor, maybe we can, if I may suggest, Mr. Chair, we can go back to that question.
Yeah. I hope that before the termination of the briefing or hearing of the proposed 2021 budget of the Department of Justice and its attached agencies, we will be able to get the categorical and accurate answer to my questions.
Mr. Chair.
No.
May I, Congressman Lagman, during the administration of President Duterte, I am sure that aside from Pemberton, Mr. Leviste was granted executive clemency and also Robin Padilla. But for the past administrations, I think the best person to answer would be the chairman of the BPP, because during those times they were already kept records of that.
Maybe Yusek Marco, just provide us a copy na lang. Yung
We
mga
can
ibang
do that.
president na nag-grant ng pardon at parole, bigyan nyo kami ng copy dito sa committee.
We can provide you a copy, Mr. Chair, of
Yes,
those.
please, para to make sure na meron kaming knowledge dito. Yes, Congressman Lagman, you can proceed with your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But with respect to Robin Padilla, no less than the Undersecretary said that he is not certain whether he was granted pardon without the recommendation of the Board of Pardons and Parole. Now, with respect to Mr. Libiste, well, the recommendation was adverse. Anyway, it passed the scrutiny of the board, and the president had the absolute power to reject or not to follow the recommendation of the board. But at least the process went through the board. Now, my question is, under the rules of the board, who are the prisoners or convicts qualified to be granted absolute pardon?
Yusek Marco.
Mr. Chair, if I might just interject, the congressman is correct that the Board of Pardons and Parole, the mandate of the Board of Pardons and Parole is to deliberate and recommend to the president whether a certain PDL may be granted executive clemency. But, Your Honor, that is not absolute. Whatever the recommendation of the board is, the president may reverse that, and that is enshrined in the Constitution. The president has that power.
That is not the question.
Yes, Your Honor. That was I just had to make that before.
As I've said, as long as the process went through the board, then the recommendation of the board can be rejected or not followed by the president, because the power to grant pardon is absolute. It is absolute in the sense that once it is granted, it is irrevocable, it is final and unappealable. But it is not that absolute that it should be free, that it should not be free from arbitrariness or caprice. That's why we have the board to make the necessary investigation, review, and recommendation for those who are entitled to executive clemency. My pending question is, under the rules of the board, who are qualified to be granted absolute pardon?
Mr. Chair, to answer your question, a person, a PDL who has served maximum sentence or has been issued a certificate of final discharge may be granted executive, may be granted absolute pardon by the president, Your Honor.
Congressman Lagman, please proceed to your last question po.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in this particular case, the qualification is the person to be pardoned has served his maximum sentence or granted final release and discharge of termination of probation. This is under Section 10C of the rules of the board. Now, may we know whether in the case of Pemberton, he is qualified under this rule, and whether the Board of Pardons and Parole recommended his absolute pardon to the president?
Mr.
Yusek
Chair,
Marco. Yes.
Mr. Chair, the case of Pemberton did not go through the process of deliberations before the BPP. It was the sole act of the president, Mr. Chair.
And under the rules of the board, he is not qualified because he has not served his sentence or granted final release. Is that correct?
That may be subject to the deliberations. That's one of the factors that may be considered, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
It was not deliberated on.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Well, it is a matter of fact, Mr. Chairman, that he has not served his maximum sentence. And when he was granted the absolute pardon, there was no final release in favor of Pemberton. Those are all irrefutable facts, Mr. Chairman. I would now terminate my question with respect to the Bureau, to the Board of Pardons and Parole. And if we can just get a more definitive answer to my other questions subsequently, Mr.
We will
Chair.
comply, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
we will ask them to give us the answer.
Mr. Chairman, I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Back to the Department of Justice.
Thank you. Secretary Guevara, itong yung kay Presidente ba, sa tingin nyo ba may mali bang Presidente sa pagbibigay ng absolute pardon clemency kay Mr. Pemberton?
Wala akong nakikitang mali sa ginawa ng Presidente, Mr. Chair, because he was merely exercising a power granted to him under the Constitution. Now, yun namang pag-grant ng power na yun under the Constitution ay hindi naman nakabatay o nakakondisyon sa rekomendasyon ng Board of Pardons and Parole. Kahit nga hindi na-process ng Board of Pardons and Parole, it is my opinion that the President may still, on his own, grant executive clemency. Pero tama naman din po ang punto ni Congressman Lagman na ang pagbibigay ng executive clemency ay hindi naman dapat na whimsical or arbitrary. May punto rin naman po iyon. Pero dito po sa ginawa ng Presidente na nagbigay siya ng executive clemency, ng absolute pardon kay Mr. Pemberton, siya naman po ay may pinagbabasihan. At yun naman po ay hindi plucked from thin air, so to speak.
Ilang taon po ba ang terms ng sentence ni Mr. Pemberton?
Maximum ay 10 years.
10 years.
Minimum of 6 to a maximum of 10.
Ilang taon na po ba siya nakakulong?
Kulang-kulang 6 years, kung di ako nagkakamali, Mr. Chair.
So kung ang kanyang sentence ay minimum of 6 years, maximum of 10 years.
Yes, without computation of good conduct time allowance.
Wala
pa
pang,
yun.
hindi pa kasama yung good conduct.
That is
So
correct.
sa tingin nyo ba si Pemberton ay dapat, pwede rin siya mag-qualify dito sa good conduct and time allowance?
Definitely, Mr.
Si
Chair.
Mr. Pemberton ba ay nagluluto ng drugs nung siya ay nakakulong o kamusta ba siya bilang isang prisoner natin?
Wala tayong exact information regarding that, Mr. Chair, dahil siya is nasa isang facility, no? Special facility sa Jusmag compound dahil yon ang arrangement under the Visiting Forces Agreement. Hindi naman siya kasama doon sa mga karaniwang preso.
So wala siyang violation.
Ang report, yes, wala na.
yes.
Yun po ang sinasabi ng presidente natin, Mr. Chair, na wala namang nagre-report.
Hindi naman siya nagpapasok ng babae doon sa kulungan.
Yes, wala namang mga ganong report
Wala. So
na may mga violation
para lang
siya.
clear po sa ating mga kababayan, siya po ay qualified sa good conduct and time allowance.
Well, in the President's opinion, it is fair to grant him good conduct time
Yes, dahil
allowance.
ito ay batas na natin.
Yes.
Ngayon po, last ko na lang po, gusto ko lang malinawan lahat tayo eh. Ang kanyang sentence po ay minimum of 6 years, maximum of 10 years.
Mhm.
So siya po ay kulang-kulang 6 years na rin nakakulong.
Mm.
So
Tama po
kung
yun.
nagpardon ng ating presidente, ipapasok siya sa minimum sentence.
Tama po yun.
Okay, yun lang po, para lang po maliwanag sa ating mga kababayan ngayon na nakatutok sa Facebook, para po kasi magko-comment din sila para hindi ko nababasahin at nasagot nyo na po. Maraming salamat po, Secretary. Ngayon po, punta tayo kay Vice Chairman ng Appropriations, Congressman Rufy Biason. I'm sorry. Congressman Rufy Biason, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
You're now recognized, Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our colleagues from the Department of Justice. Good morning as well. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll go direct to the questions.
Yes, please.
To the DOJ, what is the position or direction of the Department of Justice with regard to the transfer of the new Bilibid prisons located in Muntinlupa City?
Yusek Marco, please answer the question.
Good morning, Congressman. Mr. Chair, during the time of the previous administration under Director General Faeldon, they already conducted a study, for the actual transfer of the NBP to another area. So they were debating on whether it was going to be transferred to either Sablayan or in Nueva Ecija. But after the change in administration, Director Bantag, there was a change also in priorities, Mr. Chair. So the focus now is on corruption. But so the transfer had to take a backseat. But now we are already resuming it, Your Honor, the talks. But the direction of the DOJ is to actually transfer because the congestion rate is very high right now. And the only way to solve a lot of problems inside the NBP is to really transfer and have a better facility. But as to where it's going to be transferred, we don't know yet, Mr. Chair.
Congressman Rufy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Okay. To my next question, Mr. Chairman. Does the Bureau of Corrections have absolute independence in deciding on the transfer of the NBP or what to do with the property located in Muntinlupa City? Because under previous administrations, it seemed that that was the position, that the Bureau of Corrections can make that decision on its own based on what was claimed as an authority given by the Bucor Modernization Law.
Yusek Marco, please answer.
Mr. Chair, the relationship between DOJ and the Bucor is administrative supervision. So when it comes to day-to-day activities, the DOJ cannot intervene. But when it comes to the transfer of the NBP, I would say that that involves a policy, Your Honor. So that would have to go through also the DOJ. So I would suppose that the Secretary will have to also review the documents before they can implement something as big as that, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do agree with that policy, considering that it would involve property of the national government. On the third question on the same matter, does the Secretary agree with this representation that any development in the NBP property should be in consultation or coordination with the LGU, where the NBP is located?
Secretary Guevara, you're now recognized.
Mr. Chair, I would say na it is proper, no? Although hindi naman talaga legally mandated, I would say na it would be very proper na magkaroon din ng consultations between the Bucor authorities and the local government unit concerned dahil nahandun yun sa teritoryo ng local government unit at maraming mga nakatira doon, residents doon sa area na yon, no, na nasasaklawan din ng local government unit. So palagay ko ay mahalaga na mayroong proper consultations din naman, although not legally mandated.
Thank you. Congressman Rufy Biason.
Yes, thank you, Secretary, for that statement. Because not only are the residents affected, but of course, any development would definitely involve the local government. Now, shifting to related but a little bit local concern. Kamakailan po, may mga dinemolish na families within the NBP property. And it kind of goes against what the President's statement was, no? Early in his term when he said, and I quote, "During my time, there will be no demolition pag walang relocation. Hindi ako papayag." And he said, kasi kung walang mapupuntahan, sisirain mo ang bahay parang aso. Saan pupunta yung mga tao? End of quote. As a background, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, nagkaroon ng demolition kamakailan dyan sa Bilibid Prison. And of course, ang concern natin, saan mapupunta yung mga tao considering na we are in a pandemic and it was rainy season. When I inspected the property, ang nakita ko naman po, nilipat yung mga tao sa isang lugar within the NBP property. At medyo masukal yung lugar, kanya-kanyang putol ng talahib. But at least merong lugar na pinaglagayan sa kanila. Now, I would like to hear from the Bucor if it is confirmed na sila ang nagbigay ng permiso doon sa mga bahay, mga pamilya na dinemolish nila sila nagbigay ng permiso na lumikas lang sa ibang bahagi ng Bureau of National Bilibid Prison Property, yung demolished families na yon. At kung meron pang mga kasunod, doon pa rin ba rin sila ilalagay?
Thank you, Kong Rufy, for your last question. Bucor Director, can you please answer the question of Honorable Rufy Biason?
Good morning po, Mr. Chair at Vice Chair at sa lahat po na nandito ngayon.
Good morning. You can now answer the question of Congressman Rufy Biason.
Totoo po yung nagkaroon ng demolition dahil nga sa mga nakatira doon ay mga ex-convicts na nagkaroon po ng isang patayan sa isang Bucor personnel na ang isang tinuturo ay mga ex-con sa intelligence report na nandun lang sa malapit po sa ating mga facilities na dapat naman ay hindi sila dapat nandun. So nagkaroon po tayo ng demolition with my guidance talaga at tama po yung sabi ni Vice Chair na nagkaroon po ng relocation for the meantime dahil nga in accordance sa instruction po ng ating presidente na mayroon dapat malipatan. Mr. Chair po.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just a parting statement.
Okay, please, Kong Rufy, go ahead po.
I'm happy that Director Bantag confirmed yung pangyayari, no, yung demolition at yung paglilipat. Ninais ko lang naman po na magkaroon ng formal, no, na pag-acknowledge nito. Dahil walang puro verbal po ang binigay na assurance doon sa ating mga naninirahan doon. And sumulat po ako sa DOJ at kay Director Bantag, dated September 10 yung letter. And we do hope, no, na magkaroon ng formal reply para meron hong masasabing kasulatan itong na mag-cover dito sa policy na ginawa natin patungkol dun sa mga nilipat na mga residente. Yun po magiging sapat naman na at least merong bagay na mapanghahawakan yung mga naninirahan din. Maraming salamat ulit Mr. Chairman at kay Secretary at kay Director Bantag. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Kong Rufy. Ngayon, puntahan po natin si Congresswoman Arlene Brosas. Congresswoman Arlene, nandiyan na po ba kayo?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Ma'am, kamusta na po kayo?
Okay naman, Mr. Chair. Ito, nagre-ready pa rin for interpellation.
Okay.
Nagre-review.
Puso nyo ha. Game po. Tanong na po kayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, anong agency po yung nagluwal? Tanungin ko po kung magkano yung increase ng appropriations ngayon sa Department of Justice?
Sec Guevara, can you please answer?
Mr. Chair, we proposed for 2021 the total amount of 22,572,000,000 pesos, Mr. Chair, and that's an increase of 2.48% over the budget granted to the Department of Justice in 2020. We actually proposed a much higher amount to the Department of Budget and Management. We proposed 33 billion pesos, more or less, Mr. Chair. But what was approved by the Department of Budget and Management was 22,572,000,000 pesos. 2.48% increase.
2.48 increase daw po, Congressman Arlene.
Okay. Mr. Chair, anong agency yung nagluwal ng budget para sa special facility ni convicted murderer Pemberton noong dito pa siya nakakulong? I believe sa inyo po dapat malaman kung saang budget ng special facility yon nakalagay. Tinanong ko rin po kasi ito sa Department of Foreign Affairs.
Tinatanong po niya sino po yung gumastos dun sa nung nakakulong po si Mr. Pemberton dito sa Pilipinas.
Mr. Chair, I suppose that would be covered by the visiting forces agreement, but definitely part of the expense would have been borne by the Bureau of Corrections. Kasi Pemberton was a prisoner, he was serving sentence, and although he was in a special facility, still the supervision over his imprisonment would fall under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Corrections. So while not probably totally shouldered by from the budget of the Bureau of Corrections, I would say that part of it.
So may part na ang Bucor po ang gumastos.
I would say so.
Malakas po ba kumain si Pemberton? Ma'am, yan po
I
ang
wouldn't
sagot
know.
niya. Part
Mr.
po.
Chair, Mr. Chair, saan po mismong line item sa mga nakaraan nitong budget ibinabawas ang gastos para sa special facility ni Pemberton? Hindi naman po siguro maaaring wala kasi Mr. Chair, 6 na taon po yan eh. Dapat familiar po ang DOJ or ang Bucor kung saan line item nila yan kinukuha, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Secretary.
maybe we should ask the Bureau of Corrections if they have direct information because as we have explained, the operational side of prison management really belongs to the Bucor.
Okay.
And the Department of Justice is
Thank you,
on
Mr. Secretary.
administrative supervision.
Bucor
Yes,
Director.
please, maiksi lang, Mr. Chair, kasi ang executive clemency naman yung tatanungin ko after nun eh.
Okay, Bucor Director, please answer the question.
Yes, Mr. Chair, ma'am. Ang sagot po dyan ay mayroon po tayong, may MOA po ang DND at DOJ na kung tama yung memory ko, na nakalagay doon ay iso-shoulder ng AFP ang facilities. At ang iso-shoulder naman ng Bucor ay ang pagkain niya at mga kung ano man ang like electricity, ganun po.
So pagkain at electricity ang sinolder nyo.
Yes,
Pwede po ba
sir.
malaman kung napakain nyo siya ng balot?
Wala po sa menu yun, sir.
Okay, sige.
Yes,
So, Mr. Chair, nasa corrections program po ba? Sa line item po ba ng corrections program yan nakalagay?
Director, sa line items po ba ng correctional program nakalagay yung budget na yon na ginastos?
Sa budget po yan kasi ng ordinary PDL po natin, yung pagkain na 70 pesos per day.
So yun po, Congresswoman, 70
Okay.
pesos per day ang kinakain ni Pemberton dito.
Mr. Chair, batay po sa 2021 NEP sa corrections program ng Bucor, mayroong nakalangang almost 34 million for the evaluation of convicted prisoners for grant for executive clemency. Bilang nakalaya po si convicted murderer Pemberton sa paraan ng absolute pardon ni President Duterte, mabibilang ba ang kaso ni Pemberton sa 2020 budget for this line item of evaluation for grant for clemency, for executive clemency? At magkano po yung budget na specifically for this sa kasalukuyang taon ng 2020?
Director, pwede niyo po ba masagot kung yung 25,550 pesos a year na kinakain ni Pemberton ay isinama niyo pa rin ba sa 2021 budget ng NEP?
Kasama po lahat yun, sir.
Nakalaya na siya eh.
Nung nandito pa po siya.
Sa 2021 po, pwede po ba nating tanggalin na yung 25,550 pesos only na meal niya per day?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Pwede, sir.
Mr. Chair, ang tanong ko, magkano po budget specifically for this year sa executive clemency ni Presidente Duterte? Meron kasi po yan specific, Mr. Chair. No? Kaya po natin tinatanong, para sa presentation, yung presentation na actual, magkano yung percentage ng mga inmate records, applications, petitions, communications, relative dito sa executive clemency. Sa statistiko, para po kasama po dito yung statistiko ng kaso ni Pemberton, Mr. Chair.
Director, can you please answer?
Ano yun?
Ano daw po yun? Hindi niya nakuha. Ma'am, sorry.
Ma'am, para hindi po akong dapat sumagot dyan sa ano po.
Yes.
Interject. Ang hinihingi po ni Congressman Rosas buong budget. No? Kasi kung
Kung
may binanggit sa kanina, in particular kay Pemberton, anong ginastos niya. But for 2021, hindi just to for us to be guided, ilan ba yung kino-consider na lang pwedeng bigyan probably executive clemency for 2020? So magkano yung budget diyan? Yun yung tanong, I think.
Doon ba tayo? Wala di ba?
Sino po bang pwede makasagot sa DOJ family?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Yusek Marco, please answer.
Because the good congresswoman is asking about the executive clemency budget, no, baka po sa BPP, yung hinihingi po ng BPP for the evaluation of mga executive clemency requests.
Okay, sa Bureau of Parole, doon ba yun? Yes, sa
Board of Pardons and
Board of
Parole,
Pardon,
Mr. Chair.
can you please answer our Congresswoman Arlene Brosas?
Ayan. Good morning po, Congressman. Good morning po, Chairman. I am the Executive Director of the Board of Pardons and Parole.
Yes.
Ang tinatanong po ni Congresswoman tungkol doon sa executive clemency, that is supposed to be based on the petitions and carpetas submitted to the board. We process these petitions and carpetas po. And not all carpetas and petitions are recommended. So we can only process those who are qualified. As far as the board is concerned, we processed in 2019 commutation of sentence to 2,486. Conditional pardon 19. Absolute pardon 2. These are based on carpetas received from the Bureau of Corrections po. Aside from this po, we also grant parole to 5,473. These are also based on carpetas received from the Bureau of Corrections, ma'am. Chairman.
Congressman Arlene, okay po ba yung sagot ni board?
Yes, Mr. Chair, babalikan ko po yan. Yung sa good conduct time allowance po, Mr. Chair, bago pa man bigyan ni President Duterte ng absolute pardon si convicted murderer Pemberton, bali-balita na rin yung balak questionin. Hindi lamang ng pamilya ni Jennifer Laude ang desisyon tungkol sa pag-qualify niya sa GCTA, kundi mismo ng Department of Justice. Mr. Secretary, legally, saklaw ba ng GCTA si convicted murderer Pemberton?
Congresswoman, si Mr. Secretary po ay naglalabas lang po ng kanyang sama ng loob sa banyo. At ito na po siya. Mr. Secretary, ang tanong po ni Congressman Arlene Brosas, sa tingin niyo po ba ay legally, saklaw po ba ng GCTA si Mr. Pemberton?
Definitely, Mr. Chair, dahil ang ating criminal laws, no, pati yung ating mga batas tungkol sa management ng mga sentence persons, no, ay sinasaklaw ang lahat ng mga na-convict ng court of with proper jurisdiction at nagsaserve sa mga Philippine correctional institutions. So, wala naman tayong distinction, Mr. Chair, kung ang isang sentence person ay isang Pilipino or isang foreigner. Kaya marami namang foreigners na nakakulong din dito sa atin, di ba? Sentensyado ng Philippine courts. At nasa batas na lahat ng nagsaserve ng kanilang sentensya dito sa Pilipinas ay masasaklaw ng good conduct time allowance laws natin, except those persons na specifically accepted by law or by international treaties or agreements. So in this particular case, the GCTA law, which Congress enacted, wala namang ine-exclude na mga foreigners, no? Ang mga excluded lang doon yung mga guilty of heinous crimes, recidivists, habitual delinquents, escapees, pero walang foreigners.
Okay.
So in other words, covered din sila ng GCTA law.
Congressman Arlene, yun po yung sagot ng ating butihing Secretary Guevara.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, nais pong humingi ng kinatawang ito ng current updated list ng mga napakawala ng DOJ due court, the GCTA, from those. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Ririnig po ako?
Opo, loud and clear po.
Humingi po ang kinatawang ito ng current updated list ng mga napakawalan ng DOJ, Bucor through the GCTA from those released last year. Ang inaalala po namin dito, baka po mayroon na namang mga rapist, Mayor Sanchez, murderer, katulad ni U.S. Marine Pemberton, walking freely in our society without paying justice for their crimes, all to the victim's family. Kaya hingi po kami ng kopya nito. And my last question, Mr. Chair, is about the online sexual abuse and exploitation of children.
Yes, ma'am. Una-una, ma'am, bago yung question na yan, Secretary Guevara, can you please furnish this committee a copy yung mga napakawalan ng GCTA?
Yes, we will
Thank
do that.
you.
Mr. Chair will procure the list
Okay.
from the
Comsec,
Bureau
you're
of
now
Corrections.
directed to get those documents. Game, Congressman Arlene, last question po, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, last May, the DOJ released a report indicating 264% increase in cases of online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. About 381 victims with the average age of only 11 years old, below the already low minimum age of legal sexual intercourse at 12 years old locally, with the youngest less than 1 year old. Mr. Chair, sa kasalukuyan, sa 2021 NEP, nakasaad po mayroong 1.05 million for special protection of children, pursuant to Executive Order 53, tapos 67.78 million for anti-trafficking in persons, tapos merong 23.29 million for anti-cybercrime enforcement. Sa ganito po kalaking funding at sa patuloy din na pagpataas, papataas ng mga kaso ng online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, ano po yung aksyon ng Department of Justice dito?
Mr. Chair,
yes, Mr.
I will
Secretary.
turn over the floor to Undersecretary Emeline Villar, who is also joining us through Zoom.
Okay.
She's the one in charge specifically of human trafficking and stuff like this.
Okay. Yusek M. Villar, good morning po, ma'am. You're now recognized po.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, at good morning po, Honorable Rosas. Ang budget po ng IACAT at saka po yung nabanggit nyo, yung Special Protection of Children, hindi lang po yan ang budget na nalalaan para sa pagprotekta ng mga bata na nagiging biktima ng trafficking. Pero sa DOJ po, marami po kaming mga rescue operations na ginagawa para sa pangangalaga ng mga batang nagiging biktima ng trafficking at ng online sexual exploitation. So, ang NBI po at ang PNP na kasama po sa IACAT ay nabibigyan ng pondo galing sa IACAT para magkaroon ng mga operations nila, ng investigations nila. So, galing po sa confidential funds ng IACAT ay nagkakaroon ng mga investigations ang NBI at ang PNP at pati na rin ang IACAT na Operations Center para po ma-identify kung saan po ang mga location ng mga bata na exploit sexually or online as well at makapag-conduct ng rescue operations. Sa katunayan po, kahit po ngayong pandemya na meron po tayong lockdown at quarantine, ay nakapag-conduct tayo ng several rescue operations at nakapag-rescue po tayo ng mga batang biktima ng online sexual exploitation. Bukod po dun sa mga rescue operations at ang ating pong mga investigations sa pagkakalap ng mga impormasyon at ebidensya, ay meron din po tayong media campaign online para po mapalaganap ang awareness tungkol sa krimen na online sexual exploitation. At sa gayon din, makakuha po tayo ng mga tip galing po sa publiko at meron naman pong mga nagre-report sa atin, sa IACAT, sa PNP, sa ating pong DSWD, meron din pong nagre-report ng mga kaso ng mga nakikita po nila sa internet o kung meron sila mga kaalaman tungkol sa pag-exploit ng mga bata online. At katulong po ang OOC, ang Office of Cybercrime, ay nagko-conduct po tayo ng mga investigations patungkol sa mga tips na nakukuha po natin. At sa tingin ko po, ang mga tips na ito na nakukuha natin ay dahil na rin po sa increased awareness sa krimen na online sexual exploitation dahil po sa ating media campaign na sinasagawa.
Congressman Arlene Bosas, yun po, nasagot na po niya yung inyong katanungan. Meron po ba kayong wrap-up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, kaya po natin ito tinatanong kasi nga ang data natin ay 264% increase ng cases. So, ibig sabihin po, with this, sinabi ko nga kanina 1.05 million para sa Special Protection of Children, Executive Order 53, Series of 2011, 67.78 million, Anti-Trafficking in Persons, RA 9208, 23.39 million, Anti-Cybercrime Enforcement Pursuant to RA 10175. Lahat po yan may funding na ganun eh. Kaya yung mga specific programs po na binanggit ng ating Undersecretary, baka pwede pong makakuha kami ng mga specific na programs na pinatupad at ginawa ng DOJ particular para ma-prevent itong online sexual abuse and exploitation. So, alam naman po natin hindi dito yan sa transnational nga actually yung mga cases na yan eh. Galing pa sa ibang bansa yung mga market, yung mga kumukuha ng mga ganyan at nag-abuse sa atin. Tapos ang tindi din nung kalagayan natin kasi kahit na mahina yung ating yung ating internet, nagagawa pa rin mang abuso ng mga predators or nagpe-prey against sa mga bata dito sa atin sa Pilipinas dahil napakahirap ng kalagayan ng buhay natin dito. At talagang yung mga tao na naghihirap, yun yung kanilang napupuntahan na trabaho. Kaya to prevent this, yung government, kahit may ganitong funding, kailangan po maging accountable and transparent kung paano ginastos ito ng mga programa na ito at paano ito yung pinatupad ng DOJ. Mr. Chair, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, ma'am. I will just direct Secretary Guevara to please give us yung mga details kung saan nagagastos to at paano po. Thank you po, Congresswoman Arlene. Po tayo sa people's participation po, no? Meron po nag-message sa atin sa Facebook si Mr. Daniel Aguilar. Birthday niya po ngayon, kaya naisipan niya magtanong kay Secretary Guevara. Ako po, Dear Secretary Guevara, ako po ay galit na galit sa child exploitation. Pag kami po ba ay nakakita ng ganito o may alam na ganito, pwede po ba kami magsumbong sa NBI o sa DOJ mismo? Meron po ba kayong hotline?
Unang-una po, happy birthday po doon sa nagtanong.
Daniel Aguilar po ang pangalan niya.
Okay. Pangalawa po, Mr. Chair, kung meron pong nakikita ang mga tao ng mga insidente na ganito na child exploitation, sila po ay pwedeng mag-report kahit sa anong law enforcement agency, kamukha ng PNP, pati na rin po ang NBI. Dahil ang ating mga kapulisan naman po ay may mga special desk para sa mga women and children. Kaya ho yun ang pinakamalapit na po pwede nilang takbuhan para mag-report. Pwede rin nga rin po ang NBI, pwede rin po kahit sa kaninong miyembro ng IACAT, yung Interagency Council po for Trafficking. Yun ay isang napaka-aktibo na interagency committee headed by the DOJ. At pwede po sila mag-report kahit sa anong agency na miyembro noong Interagency Council.
Secretary, thank you po. Ito po ngayon, ito po yung sinasabi ko na buhay po yung ating people's participation ngayong ating budget hearing. Kasi po, bukod sa amin mga congressman na kinatawan ng mga ibang mga constituent namin, libre rin po ang mga netizen na magpatanong. Katulad Mr. Daniel Aguilar, happy birthday po at huwag po kayo mag-alala. Kahit po sa akin mismo sa tanggapan po ng AXIS Party List, pwede po kayo magsumbong at masisigurado ko pong aaksyonan namin to at hindi po namin kakayaan manaig ang mga ganitong uri ng kawalangyaan sa ating bansa. Thank you po ulit, Mr. Daniel Aguilar, at happy birthday po. Salamat sa tanong. Ngayon po, tumulak naman tayo kay Mr. Congressman Mark Go. Kong Mark Go, ang aking iniidolong congressman, nandiyan po ba kayo? Second call po, Congressman Mark Go, are you there? Sayang po ang jacket na dapat nyo pong mapapanalunan, Congressman Mark, at wala po kayo. Punta po muna tayo kay Deputy Speaker Ferdinand Hernandez.
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sige, papadala ko po yung jacket na
Mr.
pinalalunan.
Chair, I'm here.
Yes, Congressman Mark Go, you're now acknowledged. I recognize.
Yes, thank you very much. Andre, pwede ba ako mag-excuse muna? Mr. Chair, I would like to first thank you for giving me the opportunity to raise some questions, and I would like also to thank the Secretary of Justice for participating in this deliberation. And I would like to congratulate them for the so many achievements that they have accomplished as shown in their presentation. First, in the disposition rate of cases, it is shown that they have improved from 78.3% to 91.35% in 2019. In terms of the reduction of the backlog as shown in the presentation, it reduced to 32.4% from 60% in 2013 to 32.4% in 2019. In terms of prosecution rate, from a low of 68.3% in 2013 to 88.65% last year. So with that performance, I think the Department of Justice is doing a good job. I would like to ask a question to the Bureau of Correction. I would like to find out right now, how many people do we have in the different prisons under the Department of Justice, Mr. Chair?
Bucor Director, can you please answer the question of our Honorable Mark Go?
Good morning po, Congressman po. Wala po ako ngayong exact figure sa ating mga yung operating prison and penal farms. Kukunin ko po kasi hindi kami nakaprepare sa ganung tanong nyo. Pero andito lang po yun. Balikan ko po kayo kung pwede po.
Yes, with that number, Mr. Chair, even if it's not given yet, how many cases that you have out of this number that you will give me that have already final judgment on our prisoners? And how many percent are those awaiting final judgment on their cases?
Yun po, Bucor Director, baka yun po kaya niyong sagutin.
With due respect, Congressman Mark Go po at ang ating chair, pwede po bang ipasa ko kayo sa talagang may trabaho nito sa ating GCTA at lahat ng record po ng ating mga PDLs? Andito po siya. Medyo manalo po. So,
yes, Congressman Mark, baka meron pa po kayong gustong ibang itanong.
Yes, yung budget nila nung 2020 ngayon is 4.24 billion. And the budget of 2021 as indicated in the NEP is 3.5 billion, which is a reduction of 16.29% as far as the Bucor is concerned. But the proposed budget of the Bureau of Correction is the original proposal is 10 billion 200 million. Yun po yung inyong proposal. Ano pong magiging epekto nito sa operation ng Bucor with the initial reduction of your budget from the 2020 budget of 16.24%? And even worse, if you consider the original proposal of 10 billion pesos as you submitted it to the Department of Budget. Ano pong magiging epekto nito in terms of the management of your Bureau of Correction?
Director, you're now acknowledged.
Mr. Chair.
Ang epekto po nito...
Yusek Bantag, can you answer the question?
Opo, Congressman po. Ang epekto po nito ay limited po ang ating magiging construction ng facilities dahil po sa ating plano o project na regionalizing yung ating mga penal penal farms at yung mga ating mga PDL po na dapat doon natin ilagay ay medyo malilimitahan po ang pagpapadala natin ng ating mga PDL doon. So sana kung mas malaki po yan, ay makakapag-construct po tayo ng mas malalaking facilities katulad sa Davao, sa Sablayan, sa Leyte, at saka sa Zamboanga na lalagyan po natin o paglilipatan ng mga over-congested na po kasi itong ating NBP, maximum, minimum at medium facilities.
Okay, thank you. Kong Mark Bo, na-consume nyo na po yung 3 minutes nyo. Meron po ba kayong final words?
Yes, we would like to support the Department of Justice in terms of increasing its budget. The least I can recommend, Mr. Chair, is to bring back the same budget that they had in 2020. Ang 2020 compared to 2021 is a 16% reduction. So I appeal to your office, Honorable Eric Yap, that we increase the budget, especially the Bucor, to its original budget in 2020, which is 4.244 billion, Mr. Chair. So again, thank you very much, and this is the manifestation that I would like to state after all these questions. So I'm sure they will forward to us the numbers that I asked as far as the number of prisoners and awaiting both judgment and those with final decision already, Mr. Chair.
Kong Mark Go. Si Kong Mark Go po ay congressman ng Baguio City na kung saan doon ay maganda at malamig. Pero syempre, ang katabi nito ay mas maganda at mas malamig na Benguet po. Kaya wag niyo po pong kalilimutan pumasyal sa Benguet Province kung kayo ay nasa Baguio City na. Ngayon po, punta po tayo kay Congressman.
Thank you po, Mr. Congressman Eric Yap. Talaga pong maganda po ang Benguet, lalong-lalo na kayo ang caretaker po ng Benguet.
Thank you po, Kong Mark. Ngayon po, punta tayo kay Congressman Carlos Zarate. Kong, you're now recognized po.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair. Magandang umaga po sa pamilya ng DOJ. Direktan po ako sa tanong ko. Sa budget po ng 2021 ng DOJ, medyo tumaas ito ng konti, from 6.9 billion for 2020, 7.4 billion for 2021. But I observed doon sa staffing ninyo, pareho lang din yung ni-request ninyo na staffing number, or personnel for 2020 and 2021. But again, ang total number of field positions ninyo nasa 5,090 for 2020, ganoon din po sa 2021. So maybe get an explanation for this.
Secretary Guevara, you're now recognized.
Mr. Chair, may I turn over the floor to our Undersecretary in charge of Budget and Finance, Yusek Leyen Sunga.
Ay, kayo po pala yun, ma'am. Kaya pag nakikita ko kayo, mukha kayong banker. Yusek Sunga, you're now recognized, ma'am.
Good morning po, Your Honors. Yun pong aming plantilla position, based po dun sa 2019 budget na binigay ng DBM, which is 6,500 po yung aming total plantilla positions. So yung actually po, kung titingnan nyo, dun po sa aming marami po dito sa mga positions na to, kung titingnan nyo, meron pong malaking discrepancy siya, Kasi from the 6,500 na binigay ng DBM, which is based on the 2019 budget, nakapasok po doon sa 7,000 plus na yon, yung 800 na mga positions na pinapadala po namin sa Office of the President na mga positions for prosecution services. So yun po yung difference niya.
Congressman Zarate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope that in 2021, these unfilled positions will already be filled up. Kasi pabalik-balik lang yung figure
Actually, sir po,
ma'am, please address the chair.
Ay, sorry.
Apo, okay lang
Actually, po. Mr. Chair, na-reduce na nga po siya ng 20% kasi kung ang ginawa po namin, though hindi kami nakapagbigay ng updated na report, tinanggal po namin yung 800 plus na yon na nasa Office of the President kasi hindi pa naman po siya nababudgetan. Dahil ang basis lang po naman ng DBM ay yung 6,000 based doon sa 2019 na meron ng budget. Pero we will ensure po na next year ma-fill upan talaga itong mga positions na to.
Thank you po, Ma'am Congressman
Thank you,
Sarate.
Mr. Chair. Now, pupunta na ako doon sa ibang topic, Mr. Chair. No? And I have been asking this sa ibang departments din na related. Recently, may pinablis po na report no, ang Philippine government. At ito po yung report on, in fact, I think this was presented before the UN, I think, no, the Philippine human rights situation. And this report is in fact now accessible sa website ng DOJ. Although this report was collated by the DFA, but I think the inputs according to that report came from the different departments. And it is now uploaded sa DFA. In this report, Mr. Chair, malinaw po yung nakalagay dito. And I cannot just take this sitting down. It mentioned here, no, in 3.4.2, CPP, NPA, NDF delegation of EO72. And it's stated here, in Congress, 3 resolutions were filed by non-CPP-created party lists, namely Bayan Muna, Anak Pawis, Gabriela, and the Alliance of Concerned Teachers, calling for the abolition of EO70. Calling for the abolition of EO70. But the sentence there is CPP created. I take exceptions, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chair. We are not created by the Communist Party of the Philippines. Ang Bayan Muna, ang ACT Teachers, ang Gabriela. We are a legally registered party. Nagkaroon kami ng kongreso in 2000 or 1999. And we were duly elected by our constituencies. No? So I take exceptions. Why did I ask this? Because the DOJ is part of this report. So my first question, Mr. Chair, is this now the framework being presented by the Department of Justice? Does it mean that the department now would ignore complaints of terrorist tagging, red tagging, and even crackdown? Since according to this framework that you uploaded also in your website, which you are also part of, we are created by the CPP, NPA, NDF. So that's my first question, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chair.
Secretary Guevara, please answer
Mr.
the
Chair,
question.
I am personally not aware about that particular statement that was mentioned by Congressman Sarate, but our Undersecretary who's in charge of these matters, Undersecretary Adrian Sugay, may have something to say about it.
Undersecretary Adrian Sungay, can you please answer the question of our Honorable Congressman Sarate?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Like Secretary Guevara, no, with regard to that particular matter that si Congressman Sarate brought, is bringing up, no, yung naka-upload no, sa aming website. I also am not aware, pero as far as we're concerned po, no, wala naman red tagging or what that the DOJ is part of.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
very clear. No? We are created. That statement, I read that from that report. I did not just concoct that. No? Verbatim, I read that from the report. Sabi rito, in Congress, 3 resolutions were filed by known CPP created. So, what do you call that? No? Recently, hindi na lang kami tinawag na, we are already tagged, branded by terrorists, as terrorists. No? So, that's why I'm bringing this up. You're coming to this Congress, presenting your budget, Mr. Chair, no? And you are openly accusing us as terrorists. I asked the Executive Secretary, who is chair, and the DOJ is also member of the Anti-Terrorism Council. Even as we speak now, wala pang proscribed, wala pang there is a pending case, no? I suppose, in the RTC. But openly, there is a task force there, no? And the elements of the task force are openly calling us terrorists. And here is also a report uploaded in your website. I accessed this just a few minutes ago. Nandiyan pa rin sa DOJ yan. Openly calling us as a creation of the Communist Party of the Philippines. No? So there's a grave implication of that because it appears now that it is being endorsed by a department who supposedly at least independent and looking at things. There are a lot of pending cases in the department.
Mr.
on,
Chair.
on this matter, Mr. Chair.
Please, Secretary Guevara.
Mr. Chair, we are very much aware that the proscription case is still ongoing and it has not yet been resolved by the court. So me personally, I would like to ask Congressman Zarate if this report is allegedly prepared by the Department of Justice, because we are not aware of any such report authored by the DOJ, which specifically mentions that the three-party lists that you identified were being tagged as created by the CPP.
If I, Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Secretary, no, it's uploaded. No, it's in your website. It's the Philippine Human Rights Situationer, dated May 2020. Although I already stated that it states here that it was consolidated by the DFA based on the information provided by various Philippine government agencies concerned. So I suppose, since this is uploaded in your website, kasama ang DOJ doon sa nagbigay ng information. This is a collective report by the Philippine government. That's why I'm bringing this up. No? Dahil this is not a simple case of, calling us names. There are grave implications, knowing for a fact that there is now a terrorism law, Mr. Chair.
Yusek
Yes.
Mark Perete will have something to say about that.
Yes, Yusek Mark
Mr. Chair.
Perete. Please answer the question.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Your Honor. Insofar as the report is concerned, the participation of the Department of Justice relate only to the activities of the AO35 mechanism. The report was consolidated, I think, by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and we were asked to disseminate the complete report. And so on the part of the Department of Justice, we would like to reiterate that, in fact, there is no such policy against progressive groups or even those which have been mentioned in the report. The AO35 mechanism, for example, continues its investigation without regard to who may be investigated or who may be considered as the perpetrator of an offense. So that is the participation of the Department of Justice in the report, Your Honor.
Congressman Zarate, your time is loaded. 3 minutes more.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please continue.
But Mr. Chair, there is a tacit endorsement of the report. You cannot just dichotomize the issues contained in that whole report. Hindi ho niyan pwedeng sabihin na hanggang AO35 lang kami. Because the report is a report, collective report of the Philippine government. And since you are part of that report gathering, your inputs were being, I think, taken, malaking implication ito. Dahil official stand dito ng Philippine government, and you are the department tasked to review cases brought about by all this. For example, there is now a new law on anti-terrorism, and the other cases. Kaya naman, Mr. Chair, nire-raise ko ito rito. As per our observation and study, dumami ang mga trump-up charges ngayon. So, nagtatanong kami, when there is this kind of report, is there now a policy, even with the DOJ, bakit dumami itong mga trump-up charges? Because they are now condoning all of these cases. Parang naging policy ngayon, pag merong pinail ako, so file lang ng file. A lot of human rights workers, kilala kong human rights workers are now imprisoned because of in the past they were following up cases on human rights violations. Worse, itong pinakabago, si Zara Alvarez from Bacolod, walang pagod na human rights worker yun, church worker, he was shot. So, yun po ang pinaka-grave na implication dyan, Mr. Chair. This is not simple. Pwede kang sampahan ng kaso, nagawa-gawa, but ang pinaka-worst, Mr. Chair, yung buhay mo, as shown by past events. So, yun yung gusto kong ilinaw dito. Just like in the previous years, nilinaw ko yung prescription case with if the good secretary can remember, 600 names. Lahat nandoon. Even a special rapporteur of UN, nandoon ang pangalan. It's good that the DOJ withdrew that and amended the petition. Ito uli ngayon. This is a report, a wholesale accusation. And it involves us and other private individuals. So, Mr. Chair, yun ho ang gusto kong hingian ng categorical statement from our good secretary.
Secretary Guevara, please
Mr.
answer.
Chair, we have taken due note of the concern ni Congressman Zarate, and we would like to assure him that insofar as the DOJ is concerned, ay wala naman kaming ginagawang ganong parang policy ng red tagging or something like that. Dahil we stick to our basic mandate na kung ano ang cases that are being filed with us, hindi naman kami po ang nag-institute ng complaint. Yun po ay inihahain lamang sa Department of Justice, and we investigate, and we, as a matter of policy, we always resolve cases on the basis of the evidence presented before us. At least during my tenure as Secretary of Justice, I make it a point na ang lahat ng pagbabasihan ay naaayon lamang sa ebidensya. At kung meron nga po na mayroong napapatay na mga miyembro ng mga advocacy groups, kami po ay kahit na hindi sabihan, ay nag-i-initiate na ng pagkoconduct ng appropriate investigation kahit wala po nagsasabi sa amin, pursuant to the Administrative Order number 35, 2012 pa po yung administrative order na yan, para sa mga sinasabing cases ng extrajudicial EJK, no? Extrajudicial killings, torture, violation of political and civil rights, and so forth and so on. Kami naman po ay masigasig na sa paggawa noong ganong tungkulin ng Department of Justice as chair of that AO35 committee. So we just want to assure Congressman Zarate that insofar as the DOJ is concerned, we are very fair pagdating po sa
Pati
ganitong
sa
matters.
ibang party list din siguro yung binanggit dun sa tatlong party list.
Yes,
na rin.
as a matter of fact, ganun naman po ang policy ng DOJ. Wala naman po kaming red tagging na masasabi. Ano po. Yan ho ay because of complaints being filed with the DOJ.
Congressman, you have now
Mr. Chair,
one
but,
last question,
again,
please.
Mr. Chair, I'm taking exception. The fact that yung report na yan ay nasa inyong website, it's a tacit endorsement of the contents of that report. No? Hindi ho pwedeng sabihin natin hanggang AO35. Because, that's the whole report. No? And it casts a doubt now, at least, pardon me for saying this, kung nasa website nyo yan, tinatanggap nyo yung kabuuang report na yan. Kabahagi yan ng inyong report. No? Hindi ba kayo nagbigay ng inputs na huwag naman ganun? No? Hindi pwede kasi, Mr. Chair, na yung AO35 lang tingnan natin is the entire report, no, submitted even to international bodies, I suppose, no, sa UN and kung saan pa sinasubmit yan. So yun yung hinihingihan natin. Are you endorsing this report or are you distancing yourself, dissociating yourself from this report, Mr. Chair? May I get a response?
Last question po yun. Mr. Secretary, please answer.
Mr. Chair, naipaliwanag na ng aming Undersecretary here na yung matter na yon ng pagpo-post ay nangyari lamang dahil sa kahilingan ng Department of Foreign Affairs na i-post doon sa mga websites ng mga concerned agencies. No? But hindi naman talaga yon nangangahulugan na lahat ng bagay na nakasulat doon sa report na yon ay kinakatigan ng Department of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that response. Last na lang, Mr. Chair. No?
Yes, please go.
The good Secretary mentioned earlier na by virtue of AO35, no, matagal ng mandate ng department yan, they conduct even motu proprio case investigation of cases. Hingin na lang ho tayo ng report. No? This year, 4 po yung mga politically motivated cases na tingin naming major. Una, the killing of Jury Porquia, our Iloilo City coordinator in Iloilo, sa bayan muna. He was shot and killed, no, in Iloilo. And in fact, a constituent ni Congresswoman Baron Dayan. Second, Carlito Bajon, the Secretary General of Kadamay, no? He was abducted and his body was found along the streets, no, sa Tacloban, no. Sinunog pa yung katawan niya.
Yes.
Third, the case of Mr. Randall Ichanes, no, who was also killed last August. And finally, the case of Sara Alvarez of Bacolod City. She was shot August 17. She was also killed, no. So yung pong there are other cases, no, but I hope the DOJ will look into these cases. Alam ko meron kayong case build-up mechanism dyan, no, to look into especially this kind of cases that involve politically motivated killings, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
DOJ Secretary, tanong ko lang kasi minsan, no, yung mga iba kasi nagpo-post sa Facebook, siguro nang babash, nagtatag, hindi kaya minsan tinitingnan nyo doon or paano ho ba? Pag yung mga may nagpo-post sa Facebook, binabalidate nyo ba?
Mr. Chair, mari pong pakilino lang
Kasi
kung ano po
minsan,
yung nature ng
ngayon kasi
pinopost.
uso sa Facebook yung yung nang babash.
Okay.
Pwede ba mag-complain sa NBI? Kasi recently, meron pong nang babash sa akin, yung jobber, vlogger po yan galit na galit siya sa akin. Pwede ba ako magsampa ng kaso sa kanya? Sir, pakitutok muna sa akin, close up. Kasi recently, sir, yung kanyang message, hindi ko po nagustuhan. Tinawag niya po akong Congressman Eric, super guwapo yap. Parang medyo offensive naman po yun. Yun lang po, baka pwede ako magreklamo sa cybercrime. Tinatawag niya po akong super guwapo, hindi naman po. Balik na po tayo sa questioning. Punta na po tayo kay Deputy Speaker Ferdinand Hernandez. Deputy Speaker Ferdinand Hernandez, nandiyan po ba kayo?
Yes, Mr. Chair, nandito po ako.
Yun. Pasok po. You're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Magandang umaga, Secretary Guevara at ang DOJ family. And of course, our, sabi nga, yung gwapong chairman ng appropriation.
Hindi po. Inasar po ko. Super gwapo ang tawag sa akin. Hindi lang po gwapo.
Super gwapo. Very popular now. Very popular now in... dali.
Alcohol po yan.
Very popular now in Benguet, no? So actually, ang kon ko lang naman, I'm in full support of the budget of DOJ, and in fact, I will also join my colleagues in asking for the increase in the budget of DOJ because they've been doing quite well, no? Especially under the leadership of Secretary Guevara. Sabi ko nga, last budget, your reputation precedes you, and for as long as you're the Secretary of DOJ family is in good hands. You've never been involved in any controversial issues. You've been deciding issues fairly, objectively, and to the benefit of course, the general public. No? So, nandito lang ako to support the budget of DOJ, and kung may extra, and I've been insisting this, Secretary Guevara, and kay Director Distor ng NBI, na yung budget sana ng building ng NBI sa regional center ng Region 12 sana mabudgetan na para magkaroon naman ng presence, permanent presence yung NBI dito sa Region 12 na kanilang building na mismo. So yun lang ang ilalabi ko, Secretary Guevara, and to NBI Director, na ponduhan po yung building ng NBI dito. And ako, I'm supportive, and congratulations to the performance of DOJ under the leadership, of course, of Secretary Maynard Guevara. Thank you. Maraming salamat.
Secretary, mukhang hindi ka na makakatanggi. Dapat lagyan nyo na po ng NBI office ang Region 12. Ano pong reaction nyo lang? Quick reaction po.
Well, I'd like to thank si Congressman Ferdinand Hernandez for the very kind words. As a matter of fact, talagang maliit lang naman po ang budget ng DOJ. It's only 1/2 of 1% of the total budget. But just the same, we have been able to make do with this budget. It's quite unfortunate na ang capital outlay po, kamukha po ng for structures and buildings, ay talagang maliit lamang, and we perfectly understand that at this time. because of the pandemic situation, and we have to tighten
Siguro
our
after
belts.
pandemic, baka malagyan natin yung Region 12
Ay-
kasi po napakalaki talaga ng tulong ng NBI.
Yun nga po eh. I hope so too, Mr.
DS
Chair.
per D, meron pa po ba kayo ibang request sa ating butihing secretary?
Hindi, ang request ko na lang sa iyo, Mr. Chair, dahil ikaw naman ang chair ng APRO, lagyan mo naman ng budget yung NBI para magkaroon ng presence sa Region 12. Malaking bagay yung building ng NBI. And again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Maynard.
Ngayon po, tumulak na po tayo sa ating pinakapaboritong Minority Floor Leader, Congressman Benbenito Abante. Kong, you're now recognized.
Magandang umaga po, Chairman Yap. Magandang umaga po, Secretary Guevara. At magandang umaga po sa inyo. Alright. Observing and watching the stewardship of Secretary Guevara in the Department of Justice, wala po ako maaaring masabing anuman. I would like to commend the objectivity of the department. I'd like to commend the impartiality and fairness of the decisions of the Department of Justice under the stewardship of Secretary Guevara. And I would like to agree with Deputy Speaker Hernandez as far as not only approving this budget, but even adding to the budget. On my request only, Mr. Chair, Secretary, is that the request of my colleagues in the minority, like Deputy Minority Leader Sarate, would be given credence, no, as far as investigating those wanton killings of their colleagues, Mr. Chair, because I believe that you're a very peaceful man, and you would like peace and order to prevail in our nation, and let justice the due its course, di ba? So I hope that I could be able to hear a response, and a positive response, Mr. Chair, to the good secretary on the issues of alleged killings among the colleagues of the Bayan Muna and the Makabayan Bloc.
DOJ Secretary, please respond.
Maraming salamat po, Congressman, for the very kind words that you have expressed in support of the Department of Justice. Yun pong tungkol sa mga killings na nangyayari na ang mga biktima ay miyembro ng mga advocacy groups. Ang mukha po ng nasabi ko na earlier, kahit po yan ay hindi naman talaga isinasuggest or nire-recommend na gawin namin, ay nagkukusa naman po kami on our own dahil po meron ng mekanismo tungkol po dyan sa sinasabing mga extrajudicial killings. At kami po ay nagtitake ng initiative para po mag-form ng mga special investigating teams na composed of mga prosecutors po na gagawa ng appropriate investigation, evidence gathering, and case build-up. Talagang medyo may kahirapan nga lamang po itong mga ganitong klaseng kaso dahil po maaaring ito ay perpetrated by people na we really are not sure kung state actors or non-state actors. May kahirapan po yung mga ganyang kaso talaga, Congressman. But we are doing our best po. We are engaging the assistance, for example, of the National Bureau of Investigation to help our prosecutors in uncovering what happened dito sa mga cases na ito. And we can assure you po na binibigyan namin ng special attention itong mga ganitong klaseng cases dahil nga po nag-create na nga noon pa ng special group, ito pong AO35 group, para po mag-focus sa mga ganitong klaseng cases na may mga nabibiktima na miyembro ng mga advocacy groups.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
in the interest of justice, of course, I'll be the first one to actually declare, or I'll be the first one to speak if people will not agree with the Constitution. I mean, I'm against any kind of armed violence. I am against any kind of uprising. I'm against of any kind of uprising against a duly constituted government. I believe that we now have to really work on the peace and order situation of our country, and I believe that the Department of Justice has a great mandate in really pursuing justice. No, whoever they might be government, they might be non-government, but as watching your stewardship, Secretary Guevara, and I really appreciate that you always make decisions not on any kind of biased opinion, but you always make decisions based on justice, and that is what we are really looking after. So, as a minority leader, Mr. Chair, I fully support the budget of the DOJ. I believe that they should be given enough budget to pursue justice in fairness and impartiality. And also, we would like to also say that the NBI is doing a good job, and I believe that they should also be given credence to the work that they're doing. So, Mr. Chair, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much, Secretary Guevara. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
thank
I'd like to thank again Mr. Chair, Congressman Abante for his support for the Department of Justice.
Yes, alam nyo, pupunta po ako sa Department of Health pero bago ko pumunta, mayroon lang po akong gustong sabihin sa inyo, Mr. Secretary. Marami po nagtatanong kung bakit ako'y caretaker lang ng Benguet, bakit ako pumupunta sa mga malalayong lugar kung saan hindi nararating ng mga ibang congressman na naging congressman po ng Benguet. Alam nyo po, ang lagi kong sinasabi, gusto ko po makapagbigay ng pag-asa sa mga kababayan ko. Alam niyo po yung the power of hope, the power of one person. One person can change the world by giving people hope. So ito po sana yung gusto kong iwan sa inyo. Ako po kasi nag-iisa lang. Pumupunta po ko ng mga liblib na lugar sa Benguet upang magbigay ng pag-asa. Ngayon po, ang isang tao po na katulad ko, mababago ko po ang buong Benguet sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng pag-asa sa mga tao doon. So ito po ay pinapasa ko sa inyo, Secretary Guevara, na kayo po ay mag-isang DOJ Secretary, nag-iisa po. Please give hope to the people. At mababago po natin ang ating mundo, ang ating bayan, kung ito po ay magagawa natin. At ako po ay saludo sa inyo. At bago po yan, session, briefing suspended po tayo.